Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist. And for today's episode, we are going to be discussing the sad passing of Myles Goodwyn, the April Wine vocalist who just passed away recently at the age of 75. And I'll be perfectly honest with everybody. I don't know a whole lot about April Wine. I'm have Nature of the Beast. I remember getting this on cassette when I was younger, when I was in a record club. And I've wanted to actually do an April Wine episode for some time. And I had originally talked to Martin Popoff about it a while back because I really felt like I didn't know anything about them. And I was really surprised at how big of a catalog they have. So to help me out with this tribute, I have here Tony Dio is joining me, and Butch is joining us. Both guys have been here at the Lair before. So guys, thank you for joining me here.
Thanks for having us.
Tell me about Tony. Tell me about. Let me know your thoughts on April Wine and Myles Goodwyn here.
Myles was he's just a brilliant songwriter, and I mean, he had so many great songs that he came up with, and he started the band in 1969 in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So they had a long history. You know, they were around for quite a while, and I mean, April Wine basically, I mean, they had numerous gold and platinum albums in their home country, but you know, kind of just that late 70s, early 80s period for them. They had some success here in the States with a couple of albums, and I know they did tour over here. How much I really don't know, and unfortunately, I never got a chance to see them. And you know, it's really sad because I mean, I always wanted to see them, and they didn't come over here. In the last 10 to 15 years, I don't remember them coming over here to the States for a whole lot. Maybe they would come into some of the border states to Canada sometimes, but in 2020, I was actually supposed to go see them. They were playing up in Pennsylvania, but you know that winery that has it's a winery that has like an amphitheater there. It's called like Spyview or something like that winery.
I'm not sure. It might be the other side of the state, maybe.
Yeah, do you know what part of Pennsylvania
it
was in?
it. But they were supposed to play a show, which is kind of like an 80s, nostalgia type show. And they had like, I think like Winger and Firehouse, some different bands were on it. And I saw April Wine and I was like, I got to go see this. So I actually bought tickets. And of course, COVID comes in and everything gets canceled. So that was my one shot to see them. And then Myles actually just retired earlier this year. He stepped away from the band. The band is still continuing. Then they have someone that replaced him. But Brian Greenway, who came in the band in like 1977, 78, he continues to keep the band rolling. He's like the only member from the classic era, basically. But he keeps the name going. But I didn't hear exactly how Myles Goodwyn passed away. But I feel like with him stepping away from the band earlier this year, maybe he had some health issues that he just didn't want to, share, and he just kind of just away. But yeah, I got into them probably. I remember in the early 80s when we first got MTV. There was MTV used to have a Saturday night concert that would come on, and
those were awesome.
And they would, but a lot of them were shot exclusively for MTV.
Yeah,
they had one that was from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, live April Wine, and it was from the Power Play tour, which was the album after Nature of the Beast. And I remember watching that and thinking, oh, these guys are great, And I picked up Nature of the Beast. I remember that was like the only one I had for the longest time. And I remember maybe in the later 80s going to the video rental store I would always like I used to always I was always the store that I worked at. I was always off on Fridays, and I'd go get a couple of pizzas and get a couple of movies and stuff, and go home and watch movies from the video store. And I was in there one day and I found Live in London April Wine VHS, and I remember buying renting it, and watching that. I actually ended up I had two VCRs hooked up so I could dub stuff, and I had. But yeah, it was that was a great concert, and I just always thought they looked so cool. I mean, you had three guitar players, you had a couple guys that were kind of bearded, guys up there playing, and you had Brian Greenway. He's wearing like the kimono that looked. It was kind of popular in the early '80s. You saw a lot of bands doing that, and you had Jerry Mercer on drums, and he was bald with a beard. And in like the early '80s, you didn't see a lot of bald guys in bands, except you had Angry Anderson and Chris Slade and maybe a few others. But I always thought he looked so cool. He had a big double bass drum kit. So yeah, they were definitely a cool band that as the years progressed into the '90s, I started picking up more stuff by them. And they've got I didn't even write it down. I looked how many studio albums they had, but we can go through a little history here. I say Butch wanted to say something here about how he got into the band.
Yeah, I probably got into them roughly the same way you did. The early days of MTV, I can remember the concerts on Saturdays, and but also what they would do back then was because they had so few, video was just a new thing, so they would like split off songs from these shows sometimes. And like I remember the first thing I ever heard by them was definitely there was a live video for Sign of the Gypsy Queen.
It's probably live in London. Probably the same.
Yeah, I mean it's a brilliant song. Oddly enough, that they didn't write it. I didn't know that until
really
like in the last year. I should have written the artist name down. If there's actually a 45 I want to try to get of the original version of it, but they did a great cover. They made it their own, which is what they did. I mean, their cover of 21st Century Schizoid Man is great too, from
absolutely. Yeah.
So Sign of the Gypsy Queen, I remember hearing, you'd hear it on FM radio. And then of course this was around the time Just Between You and Me was like a top 30, top 25 kind of hit. So there was some buzz about them. The prior record, Harder Faster, had I Like to Rock, which is still I still hear it on the radio here. I still hear Roller from First Glance. So they were on a little bit of a they're a little bit of a roll, with First Glance, and then Harder Faster into Nature the Beast. And then they kind of like they started falling off of Power Play. I really do like the Animal Grace album a lot. It's a quirkier record. It's a little bit more I think it leans into almost like a new wave kind of thing. A lot of keyboards and stuff on it. But This Could Be the Right One and Sons of the Pioneers are great songs. But like, and that was actually my first April Wine album that I owned. I bought that. I heard This Could Be the Right One on the radio, and went out and bought that record. I mean, these years like 82 to 84 were my my big years for starting to get into music. So this is when I was like buying things for the first time by a lot of bands. But I probably go between Nature the Beast, and I mean these three I think are of the catalog. Here you have Harder Faster. This is probably the heaviest one, I think. First Glance is pretty heavy too. That's got Roller on it, and what else is on here? Get Ready for Love is great. I think a talented band. I think they're one of those bands, at the time, of course they fit into what was going on with hard rock and metal, but I think they also, you could see where a band like them kind of fell between the cracks a little bit. They were kind of like one of these bands that wasn't full on a heavy metal band, and they weren't like super poppy, but they didn't I think in re-listening to Nature of the Beast, I've listened to it a lot since Myles passed and Get Ready for the Show, and like the songwriting is really good on here. There's some strong songs on this, and there's also there's some things they did that are kind of like I used the term, quirky with this. Like I think there's spots in it where they do delve into like an 80s kind of like a new wave isn't exactly what it is, but I mean they do like seems like they're dipping their toe in it a
Future
little bit.
tense, like future
Yeah.
tense.
Yeah,
You know,
like future tense. Let me see, like I love All Over
Caught on a
Town.
Crossfire. Is that one of the titles, I think?
What do we got here?
Crossfire or something.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Sign of the Gypsy Queen is the first one on the record that I think like leans into. It's got the double guitars. It leans into being an almost, towards metal kind of thing, kind of like similar to like what Triumph was doing at
Yeah,
the time. Is
totally.
that kind of vibe, which makes sense. Just Between You and Me, Big Ballad. I Want to Rock is kind of like a throwaway kind of rocker, but it's
That's
fun.
kind of a poppy, yeah, like a pogo stick poppy song, you know.
Yeah.
Crash and Burn's a good heavier one, you know.
Yeah, Crash and Burn's really cool. Bad Boys is fun. Um, Big City Girls is catchy as hell. I really like that song. Future Tense is cool. So I think the album should have done better than it did. It was, as far as I know, their highest charting record. After this, unfortunately, they never recaptured it. I think they had a Anything You Want, You Got It from the Power Play record, got some airplay, and then from what I understand, I don't even think that Walking Through Fire was a full April Wine record. I think it was like a Myles Goodwyn solo record that they just slapped the April Wine name on.
It was he and Brian. The band had broken up, so it was a contractual obligation with Capitol. They owed them a record, basically. I remember seeing the Enough's Enough video where they're in that train car, like on Night Flight, maybe not even on MTV, but like on Night Flight,
Right.
But I remember everybody had Nature of the Beast though around that, even like around 83, 84, a couple years later. I remember just like going to hanging out and riding, cruising around with people, and they'd have that tape and would play it, because it was so popular. And I remember seeing, Sign of the Gypsy Queen, but they would show Just Between You and Me, which was actually, I think, from that Live in London show, possibly.
Yeah.
They used to show that, pretty regularly. And I do recall hearing that one on the radio a few times back then as well. But
it was all over that song was all over the place. I'm actually surprised it didn't. It feels like to me, for what I remember, that it was one of the songs that I would have thought would have charted higher than it seemed like it was on the radio. I heard it all the time.
Well,
but
Nature of the Beast actually is a platinum album in the U.S.
Oh wow! It went
and
platinum. Yeah.
The one before it, what we're saying,
Harder
Faster is actually gold. So I don't know if it went gold first or it just went gold on the back of Nature of the Beast taking off and going platinum. Sometimes they'll go back and people will buy the record before.
Yeah.
It causes it to start up.
I feel like they were on a build at the time. I mean, they were most of those records prior to that. I think Stand Back might have been I'm probably going to be wrong on this, but Stand Back's the first one I remember being released fully in America. Although the others are so those early ones are on Aquarius.
Yeah,
and those old records are like kind of like, I don't even know how to describe them. They go from like folky and
they're all over the place, man. They're like you'll have folky type songs, you'll have heavy rock songs, you'll just have some stuff that's just kind of, straight ahead rock songs, a little Beatle influence on some stuff, I hear. But I was gonna kind of go through a little timeline situation here. I guess the first album was 1971. It was Myles with the Hinman brothers, and by 1972 they did On Record, and that one has You Could Have Been a Lady, which was probably their first breakout hit, and that is a really rocking song. I mean, that could have ended up being on one of the later records we were talking about, because this seems like it stayed in their set. And they had Jim Clinch on bass then. Then they had Electric Jewels. I need to get a copy of Electric Jewels myself. I think right after Electric Jewels that came out, this is the first thing I've got is this live album that came out over in Canada. And this actually was a platinum album for them. big breakout for him. But we've got pretty much you mentioned Stand Back. That was another early record for them. 1976, The Whole World's Going Crazy. And then by then they had added, with Electric Jewels, they added another guitar player, Gary Moffitt. And that's when Jerry Mercer came in on drums. In 76, Jim Clinch left and they brought Steve Lang in on bass. So this was around the time where you had that classic lineup that we know from the Nature of the Beast lineup and so forth, until before they added Brian on third guitar. So they had a couple more albums out. Then they did this Live at El Macabo album, and this is actually, they were opening for the Rolling Stones, and this was a big, like, huge club that was in Toronto, and they were opening for the Stones when this was recorded. And the Stones ended up recording it as well. And I think they used some of their performance on that Love You Live album. And then I think about a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, it came out. The whole Stone set came out from that show that they did. And then, of course, First Glance, 1977. That's when Brian Greenway came in. And this is when, like what Butch was saying, that trilogy of 3 albums there that ran for them. Where they were pretty much competing with all the other hard rock bands that were out there, and had pretty much were saying, okay, we're a hard rock band, because I think before they were just kind of like all over the place. And they actually played well, we'll go to Harder Faster, of course. He was talking about this one. Just this is such a great album. Now, First Glance, like you were saying, man, it's got so many good songs on this one, but Roller is definitely the highlight, and Silver Dollar is a cool song as well. But yeah, man, this one, Harder Faster, it's some really good stuff on this. Ladies Man, I mean, Babes in Arms is a cool song. But like we were talking about, Before the Dawn, that was Brian's song. Brian came in and he sang lead on that one. And you had these 2 videos that they made for I Like to Rock and for Before the Dawn, and they're in Liz studio, like
the Rush video.
Rush's video. So they're in that studio doing these songs. And those songs, I hadn't really noticed that much difference in Before the Dawn, but the version of I Like to Rock that you get on the music video is totally well, not totally, but much different than the version you get on the studio version on the album. And I actually had friended Myles on Facebook, and I was watching it one day. I said, man, that's a different version. I wonder if that's on any of the compilations. So I sent him a message and just asked him about it. And he said, no, it's not on any of the albums. He actually replied back and says, it's not on any of the albums. It was just for the video, and that was it. In the same conversation, I had just picked this up that day. This is a promo album that came out to promote Nature of the Beast. And I said, yeah, I just found this today. He goes, what is that, a bootleg? And I'm like, no, it's this kind of promo album. He's, oh, okay, well, I've never seen that, but I thought it was kind of cool. He replied back. But yeah, like I said, we're going into this period, which was their big breakout in the US with this one, platinum album. And there's another promo record that they put out for Nature of the Beast. It's got songs from Nature of the Beast and Harder Faster. So like we're saying, they were really pushing those 2 albums at the time. And then after that, of course, like Butch said, to go into Power Play, and Power Play kind of is when it started kind of going downhill for them. But that live concert that I saw on MTV from Iowa, they were headlining act, and it was from this tour, and they've got like a big stage with ramps and drum risers and all. It looks really, So, but then they went into what was the CDs I got here? They went into the I don't have Nature to Beat. I mean, Animal Grace on LP, but I do remember they had a video for Sons of the Pioneers. I remember seeing that one as well. But there's some cool songs on there. Hard Rock Kid, Too Hot to Handle. There's some good stuff. You said that was the first one you got, Butch?
That's the first. I had it on cassette. And like I said, I bought it off the tail of hearing not Sons of the Pioneers, but This Could Be the Right One
Yeah.
on the radio. I always liked that song from the first time I heard it. Like I said, it was a shame that record didn't do better. I think they kind of got. I think that album's a little bit. I mean, starting with Power Play, moving to that one, they kind of started like getting a little bit more commercial for the radio at the time. But I think they ran into the same problem a lot of bands did that started in the 70s and swung over to the 80s, is that they never fully, they weren't like full on metal bands when that was getting bigger. And I think they had like a, the image thing, like you didn't see too many bands in 82, 83 coming out. The new bands that were getting big didn't have beards and things like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
So
so
they're
I
a
think
70s band, and that's what
Yeah.
shocked me about them when I was thinking about doing a video on them like a while back, and because I was shocked at how many albums they had. I just looked. Nature of the Beast is their 9th album. So they were 9 albums deep before they broke in the States. Now, like you mentioned, they were, successful, had success in Canada, but here in the States. And it was such a strange series of like, so when I was younger, I got that Nature of the Beast on cassette through a record club. And it was one of those things where the cover looked pretty heavy, and I was a little disappointed. I was expecting it to be heavier, but I still liked it, but I never really pursued the band much more after that. So then thinking about it and wanting to do a video, I never did it.
It's a great cover.
And a band came through Tampa not that long ago, about, I'm going to say 6 weeks ago. They're one of these new wave of traditional heavy metal bands. They're called Dead Wolf. I don't know if you guys have heard of this band.
Yeah.
They're a Canadian band. And their big thing is like they've got these videos where they're always talking about cassettes. They've got their stuff on cassette, right? They've got a boom box that they have on a lot of their videos and everything. And I saw an interview with them, and they were going on and on about like, oh, we just love like Canadian rock, and they were talking about April Wine and Connie Hatch, and it got me thinking. I was like, yeah, and it got me starting to think about April Wine again. And I was just starting to like re-listen to their catalog when I heard the news. And literally the day that I heard the news, I was listening to Nature of the Beast that morning and was sort of scrolling around on Apple Music, listening to some of their stuff. And I was just like, wow. I was just shocked to hear that. And they are one of those bands that they came kind of early in the 80s, and they have a little bit of that leftover 70s hard rock. They're not metal enough to cross over into metal in the way of like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. They certainly didn't fit into the hair metal thing. They were able to slip in. They must have, somebody had the videos for them. So Nature of the Beast came out in 81. So that's, I believe, the same year that MTV came out. So they were just one of those bands that was able to get played. And they're one of those bands too, that if you probably talk to people who are just casual music fans who aren't, like us, just people who just listen to classic rock radio, they would recognize Sign of the Gypsy Queen and Just Between You and Me, but they probably might not know who did it. They're like one of those bands where people, oh yeah, I've heard that song. I never knew the name of the band that did that song, which is unfortunate, because like you said, as you dig around in their catalog, they did have some really great albums. So yeah, it's and I've been enjoying listening to them because they capture this kind of moment in time, this 78, 79, 80, 81, like before hair metal started, the whole LA scene exploded. Yeah, you had the new wave of traditional metal going, new wave of British heavy metal going on. But these guys occupy that sort of interesting hard rock, FM hard rock space that, I don't know, it's just an interesting thing. And I always liked bands that kind of have that 78, 79, 80, 81, that kind of like hard rock sound in there. So
yeah, I think they kind of formed, they were like part of like a group of bands that were kind of like a bridge from the, there's a lot of these hard rock bands in the 70s, kind of like by the time you got to 78, 79, by 80, bands like um, Angel and Stars and Legs Diamond. These
Exactly,
bands broken
those
up.
kind of bands. Yeah.
Kiss was on their way down, but then there's some of these bands like kind of like hung in there, and managed to transition over into the 80s. And April Wine was a band that, like, luckily for them, like they, like with Roller, started building, and so over the course of these albums, we're able to make it into the 80s, whereas a lot of these other bands just kind of like petered out because disco and punk kind of killed a lot of things. But
Sure.
they're one of the bands that managed to survive.
Yeah.
You mentioned the while ago we were talking about the band pretty much had kind of broken up after Animal Grace, and they had the one more album that they did. That was the Walking Through Fire, which was just basically Myles and Brian were pretty much on this one. But I thought it was I found this single for Rock Myself to Sleep, which is a really poppy song off that record. And this was on the movie soundtrack to Fright Night. So it was in the film Fright Night. So that's kind of neat. I actually think I had a 45 single for that as well over here somewhere. Yeah, Rock Myself to Sleep. Yeah, got a couple of cool. Sound of the Gypsy Queen. It almost looks like My Sharona single.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool. But yeah, and then they took several years off. Now I didn't mention 1980. We're talking about metal. 1980, they played the first Castle Donington Fest in 1980. They played was
Oh, wow.
I forgot to bring that album in. You remember that Castle Donington record?
Yeah, I've got that record. I should have busted that out.
Yeah, it's got, because it was Rainbow, Judas Priest, Scorpions, April Wine, Saxon, Riot, Touch, and Neil Kay, the DJ, of course, was the MC for it. But yeah, so they play a huge festival here with all like heavy metal bands. So I think they were pretty popular in England at that time. But they did break up, and I think it was 1996. They came back with 1993. They came back with this. I just picked this one up on vinyl recently. It's called Attitude.
And I didn't even know that came out on vinyl.
It came out like last year, I believe, or year before.
Oh, okay, that explains it.
This is a good record. This is a really good hard rock album.
It is good.
It's got this metallic tint on the cover, so it's reflecting really bad. It's reflecting off the light, but that's actually Myles' son on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
And, but yeah, some good stuff. And Jim Clinch came back on bass for that. And like I said, we just lost Myles, but Jim passed away in 2010, and his replacement in the band back in the 70s, Steve Lang, who was on Nature the Beast, now he passed away in 2017. So there's a few of those guys have passed on now. And the only other thing I've got from them was a later album called this one came out. This is called Frigate. It came out, and this one was 1994. And they did a couple more. They did 2001. They had Back to the Mansion. 2006. They had Roughly Speaking. So they definitely stayed busy making some records, because by that time bands were taking 5 years sometimes to make an album.
Mm-hmm.
Myles finally did put his autobiography out a few years ago as well. Of course, aptly titled Just Between You and Me. And this was a really good read. I mean, he talked about, he had a career, was planning a career and doing something else, and he started playing guitar and singing at some like bars and stuff to just make some extra money, and just kind of took off from there and became a full-time musician.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's got, and it goes into detail about, all the different stuff with the band and the breakup and all. I thought it was kind of cool. Sometime in the early, like the mid to late into 2000s era, it was you heard of Coney Hatch, right? The band Coney Hatch. Yeah, Carl Dixon was in the band. I think it says from 2001 to 2004, he actually was in the band for a while. That's kind of neat.
That's really cool. Yeah, there's a whole group of those Canadian bands that kind of like have like they have this vibe like that kind of fits together. Like it's like this melodic hard rock, April Wine, Coney Hatch, Saunters, the head pins.
Mhm.
So Loverboy a little bit more, not as they don't sound as, there's like a Canadian kind of sound to some of these bands that
Yeah.
um there's just a melody to it that I think is really cool. I mean, I like all those bands.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the Helix. You could throw Helix into that as
Helix.
well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Kick Axe. Yeah,
Yeah, Honeymoon Suite. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them, but I mean, they're another one that people like a lot.
Street
Um,
Heart was another big band over there that was in that kind of, I think some of the guys from that went on to be in Loverboy. But yeah, it's they Canada's got their, tons of their own music, and they support their arts there as well. I mean, I've heard people say that, they like give them money to like record with and stuff like that. You can get like a government grant to record an album with and stuff.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that they also on the radio. I don't. Someone from Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, but there definitely was, if not, there still is you know, legally
Like
with the radio has to play like X
certain
amount of
percentage of,
A
Canadian
million bands.
music.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank Tony and Butch for coming here to help us discuss April Wine and pay tribute to Myles Goodwyn. So everybody out there, give us your thoughts on April Wine, maybe when you discovered them, your favorite albums, your favorite songs, and stuff like that. Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks, guys, and rest in
Thanks for having
peace
us.
to
Thanks,
Myles
guys.
Goodwyn.